Okay, so this is Debugging with Chrome DevTools, episode 6. In this episode, we're going to talk about debugging PHP. Now, typically with PHP, you would debug in the back end. This allows you to debug in the front end, and I'll explain a bit about that. So PHP is the language that, the programming language that WordPress is built on, and it's the back-end language. So that's what runs on the server to generate the code that you see as a web page. Now, typically, or previously, you would either save information or errors or logs to a log file, and then you would test that log file or check that log file for any errors or information to help you with your coding, or you would dump it out to the screen. So the cool thing about BugFu is it allows you to dump that data or information out to the Chrome DevTools console, which normally is only really for what's happening in your browser with JavaScript, etc. So it's a really, really cool little add-on. So it's a very simple free add-on. So you just go to BugFu, search for BugFu, get it from the console, get it from the WordPress repository. Alternatively, you can just go into here and go to your plugins, add a new, and search for BugFu. And you can install it from there. I'm already installed, so you can install it from the repository in WordPress as well. So once it's activated, you get this little toolbar up the top here. And at the moment it's showing it me red, which means it's on. If I click on that, it takes me to the info page for BugFu. Very, very, very simple. You can leave it activated and turn it on or off just with these buttons. Output stuff to the console, it's very simple. It's a static method, which is BugFu, : and log. Now, without anything, it's just going to send you a backtrace of where you're at. So what script is running, etc., when that ran. To actually log some string content, it's BugFu with a string. If you want a object or array, BugFu log with that object or array, and it'll iterate it out to the console. The other thing you can do is, if you want to, is you can turn off the backtrace, and I'll show you what I mean by the backtrace. So if you just want to see the information to the screen, to the console, but you don't want to see where it's come from because you already know, you can turn that off. I'm going to leave it on so you can see what that actually means. I'm going to look at two scenarios. The first scenario I'm going to look at is using, where are we? Dynamicooo. So if you haven't got Dynamicooo, you're missing out. Get it. It is an incredibly powerful set of controls on what you display, dynamic content, visibility, all that sort of stuff. So if you haven't got Dynamicooo, you're missing out. What it does is adds, if I'm just looking at these two headings, so I'll put two headings here. One says, show me if I have no posts, and the other one says, show me if I have posts. So let's say you've got something you want to show to a user if they haven't got any posts. So it could be a message saying, hey, we noticed you've logged in, you haven't got any posts yet, why don't you start creating some posts? Or it might say, hey, you've been logged in for this amount of time, you've created this many posts, that's great, fantastic. Or the average number of posts created by users is this, here's where you sit. So it could be whatever you like. It's just a message, it could be a form, any widget you like, you want to display under different conditions. I've picked this because it's a very simple one to work with. So let's have a look at this first one, which is show me if I have no posts. Look at my visibility tab and go to, and I'll turn on the visibility for Dynamicooo. Won't go through all the options, but the display mode here is we want to show it if the following conditions are met. There are stacks of built-in conditions, like you can enable them, go through and look at, okay, what is the what is the user capable of? So the user can. So if the user can edit, if the user can, as an author, you can actually control the display based on that. We can also, that's the user role. We can look at what device or browser, the date or time. So we could say, look, date or time, where are we? Where did I just see that? Date, time, and have a look at date or time. The start date, the end date, or period. There's so much in here that you can do. I'm not going to go through it all because you can look through this dynamic date, so you can pull that from your post type. So you might have a post and it says, I want this to be this information to be visible between this date and that date. You can pull that from your dynamic data from the post. So we're not going to go through that, but it's incredible what you can do. So I'm just going to get rid of that because we're just going to look at the debugging. All I've enabled is a custom condition. And with the custom conditions, it's a very simple, you run some PHP code and you return true if you want it to display or false if you don't want it to display. That gives you absolute control over conditionals. You can make a conditional for how long they've been logged in, whether they've got any comments on any of their posts, whether they've completed a form or whether they've entered a particular field on a form, so they've got to a certain stage. There's lots of things you can do here. I'm going to show something simple, which is basically I'm going to get the current logged in user ID. Okay, and then I'm going to get the post count for that user. These are standard WordPress function. Get the user ID is the current logged in user. Count user posts for that user ID. We can also put in a particular post type if we want here. So we only want to see if they've got any posts of a particular post type. Look at the WordPress API documentation for that. But in this case, all we're wanting to know, have they got posts? I've just commented there. So my logic is if the post count equals 0. With the count user posts, when I looked at that, it returns a string. So I can either convert that to a Boolean or just use a loose comparison with 2 equals. If I use 3 equals, it's not going to work because the post count is a string and this side is a number. So by making it 2 equals, we get a comparison, a loose comparison between a string and a number. I've also making a string, which is a converted result, where if the result basically is true, we make that the string of true. If it's false, make it the string of false. The reason I do that is because when we echo out to the console, true or false booleans just display as blank. So we want to actually have a string to represent whether it was true or false. So that's just, unfortunately, just one little thing that probably could have done a little bit better with BugFu, but the way it echoes it out, it doesn't, true or false is just an empty string. So what I'm doing is I'm looking to make sure that my method exists. So I'm making sure my plugin BugFu is installed and activated. If it exists, I'm creating an array. Right, my conditions, I'm describing my condition. So this, if the user has no post, the user ID is what I got from up here, count is what I got from up there, and the result is the converted result. And then I use BugFu log to log this out to the console, and then I return the result, so a true or false. Okay. Now the reason I've done it this way, you could actually BugFu log each one of these, and it's going to create a separate line with a separate backtrace for every single one. So it's a lot easier to read if you just create a single array, all the bits you want echoed out, and just echo that one array. Right, let's see what that actually does. So if I head over to the page, I'm going to view the page. Okay, see only one of these is showing, which is to show me if I have posts. That's because I do have posts. Now, if I'm going to look at my console, bring up my F12 from my Chrome DevTool and look at the console, what I'll see, and there's a little quirk, I'm not sure why, but this code actually runs twice, not once. So what we're showing here is our backtrace. So where did it run from? So it ran from dynamicvisibility.php. The array that we echoed out is true if the user has no posts. What we're saying is the user ID, which is the one I'm logged in, is 1. I've got 22 posts, so the result is false. It's false meaning I actually do have posts, so it's not going to display the first header. Now, for whatever reason, again, it does it twice. So the next line is our backtrace again, and the condition here is the user, if the user has posts. I actually should go back to that. On the second header, done the same thing. and my logic is just the opposite. So if the result equals the post count is not equal to 0. See? Should we do the not equal? That's the logic, and my condition is true if the logged in user has posts. Update that. So what that's giving me is saying that the true if the user has posts. My user ID again is 1, count is 22. So this condition here is true, which is meaning that it's going to display this header. Very simple so far, right? Okay, so the other thing is we're happy with all this. What we can actually do is now we can add a false. Tidy this up. There. I'm going to add false to the other one as well. The second parameter. False. Now if I do a F5, so what I'm getting is the arrays, but I'm not getting all the backtrace saying where it came from. So if you're echoing out a lot of stuff, you know where it's coming from, you can just turn off the backtrace using false as the second parameter in BugFu log, and then you get a much cleaner looking display. All right, so this is really good for working out conditionals, good for working out if you're doing custom queries and you're running PHP to work that out. If you're running code snippets that you want to work out, what have I got back? So you might find, for example, a script online to say, I want to work out how do I get this metadata from a particular post. You might run the script, and then you might BugFu log the script so you can see exactly what you got back from the database, and then you know what you're working with. So it's a much, much easier way to work than trying to create log files, echo out to the screen, etc. Right, so the next example and the last example I'm going to show you is a snippet. So I've created a code snippet here. I've just noted here that because most of us use page caching these days, this will only run when the page is not cached. So if you're going to have this as a function where you want to get meta, and the meta is going to change on the page depending on what their selections are, you're going to need a AJAX call rather than this echoing out to the console, not the console, sorry, rather than this echoing out to HTML. But in this case, let's say, for example, if you want to add meta, so to posts, so you might have a listing grid or a post grid. You go to the single post page for that post. This will work perfectly fine because it's echoing to the HTML created for that post. All right. Once again, all I'm doing is I'm getting the meta by getting the post meta for the current ID, so the current post ID. So this is based on a loop. You could make this any ID you like. We're creating a JSON encoded string from that meta, and we're echoing out to the HTML script, setting a constant of underscore post underscore meta underscore obj equals the JSON object, and then closing the script. What we're saying here, again, if the method BugFu log exists, then log the meta out to the console. So I'm just going to activate this and go back to our scratch page and F5. And now we've got a whole bunch of stuff echoed. Again, because we haven't turned off the backtrace on this, it's showing us it's come from snippets. So we know it's a snippet. Here is the array of metadata that we've got back for that post type. All right, so we know exactly what we're getting. So if we're trying to do some JavaScript that needs this and we're not getting the information that we need, we can log it out to the console, have a look and make sure we're getting the correct metadata. Then you would, let's go back to the snippet. So I've got a variable called, or sorry, a constant called post meta object. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to look at my page source. Control F, looking for that post meta object. And there it is there. So this snippet has echoed a script constant post meta object, and that's where it is there. So we're showing we've got it equals that metadata. So basically hard to read when it's in the HTML like that, easy to read when it's echoed to the console. So we could look at this instead of ever trying to figure out, okay, what have we got in here? We can see in the console a formatted array of our metadata. So we might look at it and go, okay, I'm just looking through here. What sort of things have we got? Okay, so for example, Elementor version. So we might have some JavaScript that looks at the Elementor version in that in this variable. Okay, so here's my post meta. So if I grab that and I go back to my console, I'm looking for the Elementor underscore version. So if I put in here console.log, this is just in the Chrome DevTools console, post meta object dot Elementor. It actually shows a type ahead in this console, which is fantastic. We can see this is all the stuff that's been echoed out. So that's my Elementor version. Okay, what else have I got there? What about the Elementor CSS? Really, really, really cool. It's a much easier way to work out or debug PHP code as you're working with code snippets or visibility or whatever you're working with that allows you to create PHP. It's just an amazing little free program, and I really couldn't live with debugging PHP without this plugin now that I know it exists. So I hope that's useful for you. Okay, so once again, check out my affiliate links below. Every dollar that I earn in commission from that will be donated back to the Ukrainian people.